Welcome to this week's episode of the Building Texas Show. I'm excited to talk to James Oleen from American Tenet, who is doing incredible things in the dual use space. And dual use, for those that don't know, is innovation and technology that's being created to serve maybe a military DoD use, but could also be used in the commercial industry. And it's very common that we see these early technology innovations to support the mission of DoD, but they have huge impacts in the commercial market. And when you can monetize both sides of it, it's really great for the products that are being built, for the investments that are being made. But today we're going to talk about your technology and what you're building. And it starts with the idea of drones, but it really is an AI visioning system. So James, thrilled to have you. Help us understand, what is it that you're bringing to the world?
Well, thanks, Justin. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to be here. I'm trying to basically use resources around us and combine it with modern technology to accomplish a mission. And what we're trying to do today is, my goal is to create a drone that can stay in the air for months without an engine. There was an origin story to this on why I'm doing it and how I came about the idea. So I left my employer about a year and a half ago, decided to put together a team to accomplish a project of passion that I've had since aviation school, to cross the United States using a commercial drone and FAA commercial rules. So I called my buddy Steve, and Steve was in my Army unit. We had seen each other for 20 years since we came back from Iraq. But in the meantime, he became a drone pilot for Fox News and a storm chaser. So he was a perfect person to understand the airspace and weather to come with me. And using FAA Part 107 commercial rules, you're allowed to pilot a drone from a moving vehicle, but you can't drive and pilot at the same time.
Yeah.
So he and I were in my my Jeep Compass, and we flew up to North Dakota, met up, and went to the Canadian border, which is, by the way, just an 8-foot ditch.
Yep.
There's a grass road right next to it, and that's where we started our flight. So we purchased 2 Skydio 2 Plus quadcopter drones, and these were designed as convoy overwatch systems for the military.
Does they use today? I mean,
well, a variant of it is used today. And you know, Steve and I were in the military. I spent about a decade almost in a combat zone, and I've been on a lot of convoys. There are limitations to today's technology. So that drone system has a maximum speed of 28 miles an hour, and you have to swap out a battery every 16 minutes. But there's no way if you're in combat that you're going to slow down a convoy just so a drone can watch you, or let a soldier exit an armored vehicle 4 times an hour to put a new battery in. I knew there needed to be a different solution, basically. So with my background in defense tech and my degree in aviation, I was looking at how do the birds do it at the end of the day?
Yeah.
There are these birds, they stay in the air for more than 2 months at 13,000 feet above the ocean without once flapping their wings.
thinking like an albatross.
An albatross, yeah.
Okay.
And they're able to stay aloft because there are warm columns of rising air naturally coming off the earth, both over the water and over the land. And they're using this natural energy just to increase their altitude and extend their glide path, basically. And they're just hopping from one to the next. There's actually 3 different kinds of soaring. There's thermal soaring, which we just discussed, these warm columns of rising air. And then there's ridge soaring. So it's basically hills and valleys and the wind hitting the hill and riding that to gain altitude. Then there's what's known as dynamic soaring.
Okay.
Dynamic soaring, the best analogy I have is if you've ever seen the movie Finding Nemo.
Okay.
And Nemo meets the turtle family at a certain point.
Yeah.
And they hop into the current, right? So in the air are these different currents, these different boundary layers of different pressures. So you can enter and exit using a parabolic curve to ride that pressure differential and move horizontally. So what I wanted to do was to create a drone that can stay up and leverage this stuff. So after our cross-country trip, I moved down to...
How long did your cross-country trip take you? Because you were successful in flying very patiently a drone from North Dakota all the way across.
Yep.
At 28 miles an hour and a battery change every 16 minutes.
So it took about a month for us to finish our trip. We, of course, because we could only go 28 miles an hour, we could only stay on dirt roads and county roads.
Yep.
And this drone, the artificial intelligence, keeps it behind the vehicle, drafting it to have better aerodynamics, about 10 or 15 feet off the ground. And when you come into a small town in the Midwest, in Main Street, you have these buildings coming closer. It's like being in a canyon.
Yeah.
The artificial intelligence wants to stay in the middle of the canyon. That puts it into oncoming traffic. So we had to actually slow down in towns down to 10 miles an hour so we could increase the altitude and get above the trees.
Yep.
It took forever. We did have a couple mishaps. No one got hurt. Our drone hit a power line. Turned out just fine. It took us about half a day to find it in the swamp, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But we had to go off road. We had to adjust our trip every day, basically, because of weather. Our original plan was to go to the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
But during August, it's always raining there. It's just not going to happen. So we diverted west. And, I had contacted every sheriff of every county that we were planning on going through. And then the FAA and the military called me and they're like, what in the world
What are you doing?
Yeah. And I was just like, just let me do it. I'm going to do my best. I want to stay within, the boundaries of the legal requirements and everything. So, everything in aviation going back 100 some years is all about setting records. So I just wanted to set the record and learn about the airspace, become the subject matter expert.
So where do you go from there? So you've tested this, you've achieved the dream of making that happen, but now you've really developed that into a company and a model that you're taking to market. And we talk about a drone that'll stay in air. I'm thinking a glider. It looks like a soaring glider that I would see at a general aviation airport. Am I thinking the right style of drone?
Exactly. Yeah, the exact right image in your head. So I went to Arkansas. There's a friend of mine. He's an aviation enthusiast and an engineer. And we started iterating out in Arkansas. We bought a number of different commercial off-the-shelf gliding kits.
Okay.
And we outfitted them with cameras and a computer board. And we uploaded, autopilots on there. And there was this one opportunity to put a soaring module on there. Little did I know that soaring module was actually a derivative of work that was done at the Naval Research Laboratory back in 2008. There was a program called ALOFT, Autonomous Locator of Thermals, and they built an algorithm to leverage these atmospheric thermals. And the way it works is actually pretty unique or pretty interesting and simple. The aircraft has all these sensors and knows its expected rate of descent as it's gliding to the ground. When it encounters a warm column of air, the center of gravity causes the nose to kick up, and the aircraft then thinks that it's ascending, and it switches from a mode of traveling to its targeted GPS destination to a mode of traveling in 5-meter circles, climbing this warm column of air until it's in cooler air and the nose points down. Then it continues traveling to its destination. But that system couldn't find the thermals. It was blind. So my background with drone and counter drone systems, I got exposed to a lot of different sensor packages and a lot of cutting edge artificial intelligence. And I thought there was an opportunity today to use current technology that wasn't available back in 2000, right? Like back in 2008, computer vision was just a batch file.
We were just getting the iPhone in 2008.
Yeah, I feel like that was a long time ago.
From a technology standpoint, it was. And you don't think about that.
No.
How much has changed in...
I think we were still texting, hitting number 3 like 4 times to get to the letter D.
I was, sure. But yeah, so it's come a long way since 2008 when the U.S. Naval Research Lab looked at that algorithm. But now with AI improvements, is that what you're leveraging today?
Yeah, so I'm building a computer vision model based off the tactics of a glider pilot to proactively detect, track, and identify prevailing winds.
Yeah.
Whether it's horizontal, this dynamic soaring, or the thermal or ridgeline soaring. And the way it works is, pretty easy to explain. If you and I were in a glider today, a sailplane, we'd have, a very long wing, and we'd be towed up to the atmosphere a couple thousand feet by a single engine plane.
Yeah.
That plane would let go of the rope, and now it's just you, me, wings, and a stick, and we're looking to stay aloft. So we'd be looking at the topography of the land, as we talked about before, that ridge soaring, and we'd be looking straight down to see what is the ground made of? What's the composition? Is it a lake, which could actually pull us down during the day? Or is it a field or a plowed field versus a forest? These all affect where thermals are created.
Parking lot.
Concrete, asphalt, yep.
Yep.
And then we'd be looking up at the cloud. What's the cloud layer altitude? What's a cloud classification? Is it a cirrus cloud or a cumulus cloud? These all affect how thermals are created or predict it where they're created. And then we'd also be looking at wildlife. Where are the birds flying and where are they not flapping their wings, right? When we assemble all this information with dynamic weather data that's on board, we're collecting that just on the immediate environment around us, we can do have a pretty good shot at finding a thermal.
Yeah.
So using that commercial off-the-shelf kit that we put together, we can stay aloft just using that for a couple of hours autonomously. No one's on the sticks, and it's just finding one thermal after the next. My experience, if we get above about 70 or 80 feet above the ground, we'll be able to find the next thermal in general. But if we can build this system to proactively find it, we could stay aloft forever, theoretically, as long as our system and our power continues on. So to keep the power going, go ahead.
What's the use case of a drone like this? Why would you want to stay aloft forever? I can see efficiency in running that autonomous drone. You don't have fuel. You don't have limitations of bringing it back to home.
Mm-hmm.
But in the military use case, what would that look like?
So it's persistent surveillance, or what they call intelligence, reconnaissance and surveillance, ISR. So my team, a lot of us have worked together in uniform over the decades, and we're actively pushing this forward. So we have a passion for military use cases and trying to not only deliver a tool set that's effective and a force multiplier in the field, but it'd be really nice to save lives instead of just taking them all the time, honestly. So there's a use case in the military. If America ever goes to war in the Pacific, there are going to be thousands of sailors and airmen floating in the ocean on day one. And it's not hours and days until we can rescue them. It's actually weeks and months that they'll be out there.
So I've heard you tell a story, and I appreciate that historically we have two presidents that were saved from floating in the ocean that way.
JFK and or H.W. Bush.
Yep. But when you've explained it in the past, like a plane goes down, we kind of know where it is, but it's a ping. It's that pilot's ping that you get.
Radio.
And when I've heard you talk about in the past, the search and rescue is a 300 square mile grid, and you go out and you run a historical search grid. But with your technology, you open up antennas and sensors that really can shrink that back in.
Yep.
And to me, that's interesting.
So yeah, so I have a friend. I talk about him a lot, and I'm very proud of him. He just got his wings for the F-15 Eagle. Actually, he's a backseater.
Yep.
And so if he's flying over the ocean and he has to eject, he'll hit the water, and yes, that radio will start pinging his a location, or ping out for him. There'll be one helicopter in a training environment sent to rescue him. In combat operations, search and rescue isn't the priority, so there'll also be very limited resources to find him. Again, 300 square mile search grid from one ping. That helicopter costs about $10,000 an hour just to operate it, right? So what we want to do is to put multiple nodes in the air, multiple unmanned aircraft autonomously out there to listen for his ping and be able to triangulate his exact position so that we don't have to spend all this time searching for him, and we have a better chance of getting him out of the water, back into the air, and into the fight. But also, it's going to cut costs tremendously.
Yeah.
And the risk to the search and rescue crew of flying around, it's negated at the end of the day.
Well, and there's levels of investment when it comes into hardware, like what's disposable. And my value of disposables a lot less than I think the U.S. military is, but the cost of a sailplane, much less than a helicopter, any version of the helicopter. So you have more assets that you can deploy in a more efficient way, and then it helps the mission because you can triangulate it so quickly.
Yep. And the idea is, you're right, it's being disposable, it's being attritable, or just being able to take that same budget for that helicopter, put an entire fleet in the air, and if one goes down, who really cares?
Yeah.
We got 10 others, in our back pocket that we could put up there at still a cheaper price.
It's still cheaper than hour or 2, 3, whatever it is of the helicopter operating.
Now, you'll still need that rescue crew to go out there with the helicopter, but now they know where they're going.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing.
So the commercial use of something like this, I think of forestry, I think of border operations, I think of other ways that we just want that perpetual view of what's happening.
Yep.
Where do you see traction today on the commercial side?
Well, so I actually see a total of 3 different markets that we want to explore. One's defense, and we talked a little bit about that. One's pure commercial, and the other one's government civil. So you brought up wildfires.
Yep.
We've actually been approached by some entities around the country at the federal, state, city, and local level, county level, about using our technology to help firefighters do their job out west, right? So you can imagine that if there's a team of firefighters out there, they're in the woods. It's very chaotic. There's a lot going on, and the line of fire might be just 10 or 20, 30 feet away from them, but it's so chaotic there, they're not aware of their situational, what's going on. So they're talking to us about using that warm air coming off the fire to stay in the air, look down with a couple sensors, an EO camera, video camera, and a thermal camera looking for the heat signatures, and being able to stream that simultaneously to all the team members on their mobile devices, and also back to the command center, so that everyone knows where everyone is, what's going on in the battlefield, I guess. But we've also been approached by the U.S. Coast Guard. So the U.S. Coast Guard has 11 missions, actually, everything from environmental to, managing ports and search and rescue. And there's a unmanned component to each one. And they've been talking to us about how they could use our system, because uniquely there's a warm plume of rising air coming from each ship at sea from the exhaust.
Oh, yeah.
And we can, that plume follows that ship its entire journey. So we can leverage that as a dedicated surveillance tower, while also collecting remote weather data in shipping lanes that we can turn over and gain some revenue from. But with the Coast Guard, there's a lot of interest on how do we, how can we help them reduce their costs? But for them especially, it's reducing risk to their personnel.
Yeah. Well, I think for all of us, that I'm throwing back to movies and TV shows where we're looking at wildfires, and there's always that Overwatch component. And I never think about, well, maybe it's a satellite image that they're showing, or maybe they're not flying helicopters over fires to do that. But
if they are, it's about 10 grand an hour.
Yeah, it's expensive.
For satellites, we have someone on our team that works on tasking satellites.
Yeah.
And I don't know the particulars, but it's not the easiest thing to task.
And it's not cheap.
It's not cheap.
And then it's a small window, because that satellite's moving quickly over that part of the world.
Yep.
So you'd have to have a system of satellites.
Constellation of them.
Yeah. More expensive. Yeah, constellation of satellites. So that's unique to me, that you could sit over a civilian need, forest fires, and be eyes and ears, essentially, for those people risking their lives to stop this wildfire. The Coast Guard's interesting to me. I appreciate that you answered, because earlier you said the lake would bring you down. So I think the ocean would similarly, like water doesn't hold heat typically. So shipping exhaust. And so they would just circle that ship, essentially rise up and then take the altitude loss, find the ship again, and ride back up.
Correct. Yep. And if let me just talk very quickly about one of the use cases with the Coast Guard where this is interesting. So every ship at sea coming into port, let's say the port of Los Angeles, needs to communicate a package to the Coast Guard containing their crew complement and their manifest and what's in the cargo hold and where have they been recently.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard's going to do a quick risk assessment, and if the risk reaches a certain threshold, they must send a team out there to investigate. Of course, there's risk involved in traveling and being on the ship and everything. So if we can deploy out using dynamic soaring to get to the ship and then leverage its warm plume of rising air to stay above it as a dedicated surveillance tower, we can make sure they're not conducting, drug operations, human trafficking, or what's, one of the environmental issues is just them dumping their sewage a mile off of Long Beach too.
Yeah.
Which happens, unfortunately. Yeah. But this will relieve the Coast Guard of some manned requirements and act as a force multiplier. But especially for them, it's mitigating risk to their crew.
So with all of that soaring focus, you're working with soaring communities. How are you really learning and getting into that industry to learn from the people that do it? I know soaring is a hobby for people, and we see a lot of it here in Central Texas. It's a world-renowned soaring community. I see a lot of retired Air Force fighter pilots that get into soaring, and I've heard rumor of flying Central Texas to the Dakotas and back. And I never could wrap my mind around, well, how could you fly that distance on the plane that I see it towed up and then it comes back down? That's a wealth of information in that community. How are you working with them?
So with your help, I'm getting plugged into the community here in Texas, the soaring community, but I have interacted with the international soaring community quite a bit. Interestingly, after the World Wars, Germany was not allowed to actually fly engined aircraft. So they actually pivoted towards soaring. And yeah, I'm sure you and maybe your audience have heard of Civil Air Patrol.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, it's supported by federal dollars to get youth involved in aviation to grow the industry. They have something similar out in Germany, Slovakia, and Australia to get youth involved in soaring, and they start off at the age of 14.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them just have a passion for it. They make their business and their jobs they build around soaring so that they can spend all their money soaring and competing to find out who's the fastest, who has the best endurance around the globe, right?
It's a competitive place.
It is. So I've interacted with a lot of these people to learn how they do this really, right? And, how they find the thermals, how they use dynamic soaring to move horizontally, maybe over the water kind of thing. But also they have a huge data lake of millions of soaring flights over the years, including the weather of that track, the instrumentation readings, and the control decisions that the pilot made to find the thermals. And when we combine that with the huge data lake that we're getting access to from our industry and government partners, we'll be able to teach our machine learning algorithm how to soar, because we can now validate this against real data.
So I should look for when your autonomous glider is going to win these competitions.
I'm sure that those guys will make sure that the trophy says that it's not manned.
Asterisks.
Yeah, exactly. But interestingly, there's a project they're trying to attempt to get 100,000 feet manned soaring. And this has been going on since the early 2000s. They've achieved 86,500 feet manned soaring in a pressurized fuselage.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what can happen up there.
Right at the edge of space is an interesting place in my mind. I remember Felix Baumgartner, the guy that went up and he did the free fall from space. I can't imagine sitting in a glider almost 90,000 feet up. And if you haven't flown in a glider, it's an experience. The silence of flight is really interesting. So I'm excited to hear that they're going to do that and that you're getting to learn from them and pull that data. That's what an incredible asset, and really the testament to what we can do with technology now. That's crowdsourced, best in the world, newest in the world.
Yeah, and it's a nonprofit that's been going on for years, multi-million-dollar budget, and they're trying to change how we live at the end of the day and our tool sets. It's incredible. The cool thing about the soaring community, by the way, and you find this across civil aviation, of course. You show up at a small airport with a restaurant. Everyone wants to talk about their plane and where they've been. Soaring is just like that. They're passionate about their hobby, and they just want other people to know what they're doing and to bring other people in. So it's really refreshing to be around people like that want to share.
I enjoy doing hangar flying. We have a great general aviation airport and soaring community here in our hometown, and the hangar flying where you walk and you just peek in and see, and they always are friendly. They want to talk to you about it. If I've got my kids with me, they want to talk about, hey, how can we get you into aviation? So not surprised to hear that. But I mean, in everything that we've talked about so far, you're finding support, you're finding an opportunity to fill a need, a commercial need, a military mission need. Where are you in your journey? What's next for American Tenet? And I want to pause and say congratulations. I saw you pitch last week with Geekdom. a win for yourself and a win for the team, but it's that momentum that I'm excited to hear about.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. And that's, just like the soaring and aviation community, the startup community, especially here in Texas.
Yeah.
We're just all supporting each other at the end of the day. So Geekdom is a place that I came to build. I came to San Antonio specifically for that purpose, and they've been a wealth of knowledge and very supportive. But last week I got to pitch on stage. We placed, and we got a $20,000 safe note from them.
Okay.
So we'll be able to continue our operations. But today we're raising our pre-seed round of $600,000 at a 3.6 million value cap. And we're going to use that money to bring on our engineers
Okay.
to make sure that we know exactly which tool sets and which data lakes that we need access to, so that we can build our technology and be able to demonstrate next year that we can see the wind. Once we're able to do that, we'll be able to go to market in a couple years on the commercial side. And we talked a little bit about the other two markets, but on the commercial side, we're looking at international shipping. Of course, we talked about the plume, but also critical infrastructure inspection. I have a friend today that does critical infrastructure inspections on, let's say, natural
Transmission
gas.
lines.
Yeah, natural gas pipelines, long pieces. And it'll take him and his team of a half dozen pilots, weeks to do this using a quadcopter and a DJI drone with a 30-minute battery, where we can follow that infrastructure, conduct the inspection, leave, increase altitude, and continue it on, all without a pilot.
Yeah.
But there are restrictions today on doing that work. So here in the United States, the FAA says you can't do that work today because you're beyond visual line of sight. You're autonomous. They want a pilot on there, which is completely understandable. It's all about safety. But Biden signed a new rule change back in March, creating what's going to be known as Part 108. And that's an amendment to the commercial drone usage that will allow rules set so that we can operate in beyond visual line of sight and autonomously. Because until those rule changes happen, we'll never have commercial drone delivery in the United States. And there's a lot of push, from industry onto the FAA. But now with this new administration coming on board, there is an anticipated acceleration of that. So we'll see, but I hope that we'll actually be able to conduct operations here in the States really, really soon.
I think one of the other restrictions there, and just in my background in the utilities, is you have to have American-made resources to do this kind of infrastructure work. You're collecting sensitive data when you're flying a pipeline. That's a national security risk. Same with our electrical grid and others. So when you do that, being American-made, being American company, being American Tenet is really important, because that does allow us to hold that data and use it wisely. And it is a national security conversation. Everything we've covered has an element of national security. Where can people get involved? I know they could come to you if they're interested in learning more about your investment, but soaring communities, is that an outlet where you're still looking for feedback and more?
I'm looking to connect with people that actually do it hands-on.
Okay.
The community that I've connected to overseas, I talk to them quite a bit, but it's overseas.
Yeah.
There's a time issue there. I'd love to actually go out to the field, to actually, talk to the pilots, watch them prepare their soaring operations, and discuss their operations afterwards, and really understand what the challenges are at the end of the day. So I'd love to connect to the soaring community. People, of course, can go to americantenet.com or email me. There's an email down there, or reach out to you. I'm sure you can get them to me. But I'm looking for both partners in academia. We've already established a partnership with Texas A&M with their engineering school. Looking for people that are passionate about aviation. People that are in aviation are usually very passionate about it. I'm especially very interested in veterans that can build. There are a host of veterans that are in engineering programs across the United States. I'd love to talk to them, because I'm trying to build a culture that is very proactive and leaning forward to build and to break things and learn and iterate quickly, right? Not just build it and hope that we have this one and it's got to be perfect. Let's break it and learn how to build the next one quicker. And I think the people that have been in uniform, their mindset is geared towards that too.
Yeah, it reminds me, I had a guest, Two Fish, is astronaut with Intuitive Machines, and that is their entire culture. We've got to build and break it fast so that we can iterate. It's not a traditional timeline. It's not 5 years out, you share that spirit of let's build and test, so that we're iterating to a commercial product much quicker.
Yep. And there's an essay. I don't know if you've ever read it. I'm sure a lot of your readers might have heard of it. It's called A Message to Garcia.
Okay.
It's mandatory reading, I know, for every Marine officer. And it was written about 120 years ago about the Spanish-American War. And President McKinley wanted to establish a relationship with a rebel in the hills of Cuba named Garcia. And he wrote a letter to them, brought in all his generals and all his diplomats and said, deliver this to this guy. I want to talk to him. And everyone was going up to the president being like, sir, what's his last name? What's his family? What kind of work did he do? Where was he born? And the president doesn't know. Finally, this officer showed up, I think it was a captain, and said, sir, give me that. Give me the elbow room and the resources to fail, to get there, and I'll make it happen. So I want to express to everyone that works with me just that mentality of, yes, try it. If it doesn't work, that's fine. We know not what to do, and we'll figure out how to do it later.
Well, James, I so appreciate the conversation and knowing that people like you are out here trying to solve these needs, the mission at hand, but then the civilian need as well. You're on the forefront of this autonomous drone marketplace. And I don't know that that would have been your plan or where you wanted to see yourself, but you've definitely positioned yourself in that conversation really well.
Well, I smile every day I'm doing this. I really enjoy it. I just love talking about it. I love trying to make a good difference.
Well, we appreciate what American Tenet is doing, and remind us your website again and socials. Is it LinkedIn that you're most rolling on?
Mostly LinkedIn. It's James Oleen. You'll see a pretty picture of my face up there.
Yeah.
And you can email me at james@American Tenet. That's American TENET.com. And I travel all over the country. As you know, and anytime that I have the opportunity to interact with anyone, talk about this, I'm at conferences all the time and just trying to cause some trouble in the world.
Well, the disruptive spirit we appreciate, and appreciate that you're doing it here and really making it move. I'm excited to watch your journey over the next year or two and wish you the best of luck. But thank you for spending time with us today, and thank you for the way that you're building Texas.